welcome to Lab the Podcast. Grateful for a chance to talk to my friend Liza Thurmond. Born and raised in the Tampa area, Liza is a mom, a wife, a teacher. She's devoted her life to enriching the lives of students by teaching U.S. history, women's history, and empowering students to love learning. Outside of the classroom, she spends time sewing and baking and reading and visiting art museums. And fresh to the resume, coaching boys high school swim. So add that to the list. She travels, enjoys coffee, going to the beach and the mountains, spending time with her husband and 2 daughters. In addition, Liza joined V3 for an On Beauty immersive experience. And that experience inspired her to return back to help her church lead with beauty. So for all of those reasons, Liza, thanks for making time for a conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I feel honored to be here.
Yeah, it's cool. We've been friends for years now,
Yes.
And you've been an influential part of the life of one of the churches that's really dear to V3 Element Church. And so that's how we came to know each other and get to know each other over the years. And I knew so much of your bio. I didn't know the swim coaching piece, so that is new.
Yeah.
But it's always cool to get to sit down with people that we admire and respect. We started this show years and years ago, dreaming about the opportunity to, in a world where there's a ton of things being talked about that are pulling us apart or pulling us down, this gets to be a space where we get to point to people whose lives and work give us a glimpse of the life and beauty of the gospel. And as a team, it's so fun to think about all the different voices that we get to highlight and the people we get to spend time with. And it's really cool when it's friends of ours, people that we know, and we have a really close view of somebody's life. And you're somebody that we respect and admire and appreciate your work. So it means a lot that you would come hang out.
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate that. Such kind words.
Well, teaching is a thing. Like that's a full-time job, and you add coaching to it. What's it like being a teacher in 2025?
Oh, it's so funny that you're starting off with that question, because anyone who asks me, whether they ask it or not, I am telling them it is a wild ride.
Yeah.
It's a wild ride. I think the current just kind of climate of existence in humanity and with this current generation, like it is a tough work.
Yeah.
But it is so important. I feel like the best way I can describe it is like you're on mission. If you are a teacher, like this is an uphill climb.
Yeah.
You are scaling Everest every single year. The souls that come to you at the beginning of the year, like these are who God has sent you. Like you are in charge of them, to love them and to affirm the beauty and dignity that resides within them. And that's no small task. And, sometimes they receive that well, and other times like they come from really tough spots and trauma, and they kind of fight against that. And so there's a lot of care and intention that goes into teaching, and ever so in 2025. So
yeah. It's, I think, one of the professions that I admire the most in the whole planet is the sacrifice required to give yourself really passionately year over year to teach and to start over again with a fresh group of kids who come in with a fresh group of challenges. And that is only increasing, right? Some of the pressures that kids are facing are all the same pressures that we are as adults: economic pressures and social pressures and the global pressures. And it's a really challenging time. And I feel like everybody has always said that, but you've had a front row seat to watch that. For people in a different part of the country, just give us a quick Google Maps, zoom in and talk about your school. Like what's the area? Is it urban? Is it rural? Is it a large classroom? Just give us a quick idea of Monday to Friday, you're standing in a classroom, and tell us a little bit about your classroom and even just the age of the kids that you're hanging out with.
Sure. I love that. I love that question. So I teach in a county in Central Florida. It's one of the largest counties in the nation by population. Our schools in the southern part of the county, we have a fairly large population of students. I primarily teach juniors and seniors. I teach U.S. history, which is a fairly big class to teach at the high school level. But our population is very unique. We have a very diverse population. Our school motto is literally unity through diversity.
Hmm.
And a huge population, about 40 to 50% is Hispanic. And the other half of the population is people of color, African American primarily. And so it's a very like, I would say probably, I wouldn't know. I don't think it's urban considered. It's probably more rural.
Yeah,
We've got cows across the
that
street.
counts. Yeah, that'll do it.
But it's a very suburb,
Yeah.
area of the county. So that's kind of our population. Our kids are by and large like really good, kind kids. They're very much kids. They're teenagers, right? In that part of life. And so there's a lot of kindness that I think that if most people were to come to my campus would surprise them.
Mm,
Of course, we have fights, right? Every
yeah.
school, public school in America probably has fights, but by and large, they are good kids that want to be heard and loved and feel safe, just like any kid in America. And so um, that's a little bit about our population.
Yeah. It's crazy to think. We have four kids. Cam and I have four kids, and I'm stretched to give attention, right? Like the power of our attention is so incredibly important.
Yeah.
And to give proper attention to four kids in my own home is a challenge. Just mental fatigue to like
Yeah.
really take seriously the things that are going on in their life
Yeah.
and to put yourself in their shoes and to try to think through their eyes.
Hmm.
That takes effort and intention. And
Yes.
this is what I respect about teachers. To do it well is to understand that each of these humans is coming in and they've got a unique story.
Yeah.
And to give that kind of attention to every kid is incredible. What if there was a headline for what you feel like juniors and seniors in your classroom are navigating? What's maybe the heaviest one or two weights that's kind of universal? It's every kid is dealing with this. What do you think the number one, two thing is?
I think that's a hard question. I
Sure.
think that mental health is a big piece of the heaviness that they carry, and there is a lot of isolation that they feel. So, like one thing that I see is like there's kids walking around campus and they have their headphones in, or they're on their phones, and so there's a lot of like lack of social awareness that's happening. And so, one thing that I try to do in my classroom, especially, is like when they come to me a fresh group of kids, I learn their names like right off the bat, their first and last name, the way that they want it like described and said and pronounced. And so, like, that's a way in which I can quickly affirm who they are and their personhood in my space. But also, the safety of the room is really important. I think that that is something that students crave.
Mm,
They may portray that they don't, want to learn or they don't care about school, right? Too cool for school. But deep down inside, they do want to learn
sure.
and they do want that structure and they crave that safety.
Yeah.
Because I teach US history, like that can be, and the content that I teach can be very controversial. It can be a little tough to have like very open dialogue about it in a way that's safe. And so safety is a big piece. I don't believe students can learn or be educated if they don't feel safe in your space. And so very quickly, that's something that I build not only in the physicality of my room, but also in the structures and atmosphere and ecosystem in my classroom. And I have to get them to I have to build trust to them quickly. I have to prioritize that. And so that's one thing I can see they crave is the safety. They need to know that you're going to teach them.
Yeah.
And they relax into that. And so that's kind of where the learning process begins. And so I hope that kind of answers your
No, it
question.
does. I imagine like we all probably have thought about or can think about walking into a classroom and where you had a great teacher. And teachers, right, are buying a lot of the things on their own. They're spending their own money. If you're going to create a space and curate an experiential economy that's conducive to learning and creates wonder and an invitation to rest and to feel safe and to learn, largely you're doing it on your own, and you're doing it from your own resource. Not all of us are good at that. You are gifted in that, and you've brought some art, some
Yes.
beauty into your classroom. And we'll get into that and the
Mhm.
power of creating a space like that. But I love even that practice of talking to kids by their name and finding out their name. One of our guests a long time ago, Jerry Root, wonderful guest, go listen to that episode. He had a practice of not just calling you by your name, but asking you how you got your name. And I just think I
I love
watched
that.
with wonder as he did that. And it was so beautiful to see people
Yeah.
just go, wow, you care enough to know my name. And you think about a kid who maybe doesn't have a lot of support in his
Yeah.
life and he has a teacher who knows his name.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. When did you discover that you had a gift that would end up being a teacher? Like, when did you know that from an early age, or?
I don't think so. I don't think that I really made the choice to be a teacher until I became interested in history. And so I can remember I have like this very vivid memory. Maybe this was I didn't realize it then, but I remember I was in we had like a school-wide assembly. I was in kindergarten and it was a talent show.
Okay.
And it was a K through 12 private school in Tampa. And this student, a high school student, came up and recited like a huge chunk of MLK's I Have a Dream speech. So the original speech is like 16 minutes long, but he memorized probably like 6 or 7 minutes of it. And it was the first time I had ever heard that. And I remember crying in the school-wide assembly, being overwhelmed by the words that were being spoken, the truth that was being uttered, and really the beauty of all of that experience. And me looking around and seeing none of my other peers were crying
Yeah.
and thinking like, I think I've seen something and felt something here. And that was probably the first sign.
Wow.
I did not know at the time. But I made the choice in high school that I really wanted to do something that would impact the future generation and share my love of history and really the ways in which teaching and bearing witness to our stories of humanity, what that shows about the work of our Creator and the redeeming work that He is out in the world doing
Mm.
and that we are a part of.
Mm.
When I learn history, study history, teach history, that's all I see. And so I want students to be invited into that process. And so making it come alive for them with art in some cases, or if that's music or a speech or a document, or what we're looking at, a cartoon or um, picking apart an argument, like all of that is the unveiling of that beauty.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of students that oftentimes they might not have written that they have the capability of doing that
Mm.
before they come to me. And so I try to make it accessible for them, help them rewrite that story, and then help empower them to engage the world around them with their own uniqueness and the ways in which the world needs them
Mm.
to show up the way God created them to be.
It's so cool to think, like, as a kindergartner, you're listening to MLK's speech. And I mean, in our moment with political discourse, at the tone and level that it is, you go back and you read any of the great MLK speeches,
Yeah.
and you will be moved to tears simply from the fact that there is beauty and goodness and truth just oozing out
Yes.
of all of that. And it's all aspirational. It's all calling us all forward and higher, and to realize maybe what we were called to be and who we're called to be. And it's really speech at its best and finest. And part of that potency that MLK had is that it was charged with faith. I mean,
Yes.
just a theological vision mixed with the beauty and eloquence of his speech was was what enabled him to move people and the
Yep.
hearts of people. And I hear that that faith element was a part of your vision for becoming a teacher, right? It
Yes.
wasn't just that you were inspired by a moment of learning, but you said, like, no, there's something about the creator at work in writing a story. So faith was a part of your formation as well, and the bringing, obviously the giving of that gift, but the nurturing it. Who was maybe the most impactful person in nurturing your faith along the way?
It's a great question. I think that grew up as an only child. And so I didn't have really like siblings. I think I always kind of wanted that sense of community of a sibling. And I remember always praying that God would like provide me manna of a community. And so I can see how in the different faith communities that I have been in over time that God had provided that manna in different ways, whether that was youth pastors or small group leaders, and ultimately professors that I had in college and friends and roommates. And so those were very influential people that shaped me. And then my time at Element in my 20s and the relationship that I've built there in that faith community have been a springboard to strengthen my calling as an educator and um, help immerse my classroom in deeper ways of
Yeah.
faith. And so, and kind of, I mean, when you're on mission, it gets exhausting and you need a place to refuel and you need a place to be creative and ask questions and wrestle things with the Lord. And so those have been safe places for me to do all of those things. And so that has left me better than it found me. And I'm able to go into the classroom and support students in a deeper way.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's like, yeah, I think that what a beautiful example. We talk about the life and beauty of the gospel in the world and manifesting in the world, and the presence of the church at work in the world at its best is that we are not pulling ourselves out of the world, but you're in the world and not
Yeah.
of it. And I love hearing that, maybe even a young girl prays, God, give me people in my life. And God answers that prayer at every step, whether it's high school or college or 20s, and all the way through with you and shaping you, but not to take you out of, but to equip you and refresh you and send you back. And if you're listening, that's just a sidebar. When you were saying that, I thought, man, what a prayer. We've probably all prayed that prayer, like at some point, like, God, just send me somebody to help, to just walk alongside. And sometimes it just shows up as a friend or a surprising, relationship with a mentor or relative or coach, swim coach.
Yep.
You never know.
Or a trip to Chicago.
That I love the segue.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about on beauty. And we talk all the time about beauty as a penultimate thing. It's not the thing in and of itself. It points beyond itself. And that was so important to this trip to Chicago because we were taking people and entering into a world filled with beautiful things, right?
Yeah.
Paintings and sculptures. And we can forget and make the thing, but it's not. Beauty at its best and always is pointing beyond itself. Where did you get that? You had that idea already. That was not new to you, right?
Right.
So how did you come up with an artistic education or formation? Did that come from family or friends or just curiosity?
That's so great. Having to prepare for kind of our conversation, it was good for me to kind of pause and kind of reflect back. Because I don't have a background in art history necessarily. My degree is in secondary education social studies. So I went to college to be a high school history teacher. And so even though art is a part of the content in which I teach, I don't have like a fully academic, robust understanding of the art world. And so when I began teaching, I was teaching an AP European history class where you have to teach through all of the major art themes, but you surround that within the historical context and broader narrative, right? And so that having to teach myself some of those basic fundamentals, right? More than what you would have learned in a humanities class in college. I really wanted to learn more. I kind of felt really underneath me as a teacher is I'm a student. Like I want to learn. I like to learn. And so that part of being that student has never really left me. And so in preparing for lessons, I began to like learn more and be more curious. Ultimately, I left teaching that class, and this because I stayed home and with my girls for 7 years. But that component of the art history piece, like that was the nugget that I like tucked in my heart and was like, I really miss teaching this class because I
Mm,
wanted to learn
mm,
more and do more with this piece. Mostly because I felt connected to it. I felt like this is a great way to invite students in to question, to ask, to think curiously, to look deeper, to look closer, not just within the historical narrative and context, but also within themselves. And it was an opportunity for students to be vulnerable and to engage with their content and themselves. This works really well for high schoolers. And so um, when I left those classes, part of me was really sad. And so when I arrived to the opportunity of going to Chicago, it felt like this piece in my heart that had been tucked away that really only God and I knew about was being rekindled again. And I was coming to that trip with some questions professionally, like, am I still good at this?
mm.
Am I still relevant? Students have changed. Am I still going to be able to juggle motherhood and the high standard that I have for myself in the classroom? Am I still good at this? I feel like that's always a question that I'm
Sure.
wrestling with the God. Like, am I enough?
Yep.
Am I, and I constantly have to learn the lesson of I'm relying on God. I'm relying on
Mm,
God. But so when I arrived to the experience, I had very high expectations. But it also felt like a luxury, honestly. It felt like a luxury
mm.
to be in an art museum for multiple days on an end. And kind of springboard and jump in and kind of abandon the outcomes and just allow my experience and God encounter to just happen the way that it happened. I think that not having necessarily an academic super understanding of art kind of helps in a way because you're just able to just approach the art as yourself with what you have and um, kind of ask those questions about your faith and God and what you're seeing and what truth is being unveiled. And so um, I think that all kind of worked
Yeah.
when I arrived at Chicago.
Yeah. It was cool to watch. I got to be on that trip and just as an observer, really more than anything else, watching it unfold and the experience kind of is curated in a way where the art does so much of the work.
Yeah.
That's what it's an invitation to recover a way of seeing. And so I got to kind of walk alongside as I witnessed people experience this. And I remember seeing particular moments where you could see it on people's face. I saw it on your face that there was something refreshing happening. And I love that AP Art History was in your background as a teacher. I think it's shout out to AP Art History. Best class. I think my daughter took AP Art History and she still, as we travel, as
Yeah.
we go, she's pulling things that is just a treasure from that. So having some appreciation of the arts is great.
Yeah.
But as you said, this trip wasn't a prerequisite. It's not for artists. It's
Yeah.
not for art majors or working artists or critics. This is a trip for all of us to come in and really immerse ourselves in a question that is on beauty. What is beauty? Why does it matter? How does it function in our lives? And so there's probably alluring things to all of those aspects. You were asking the question, am I enough?
Yeah.
And it really didn't have anything to do with the trip itself, right? Like, but that question was going on in you. When you arrive, you're already ready for the trip, because a part of the immersive experience is that you're doing it with a small group of people. We're talking, 12 to 15 people are going on this trip. And you had all spent weeks preparing by reading through a couple particular books. And one of the books, Russ Ramsey's Rembrandt is in the Wind, is kind of a prerequisite reading that takes place over time to get you ready for going into this experience. Was that helpful for you? And what did you get out of reading Ramsey's book? And maybe not even the book, but just the process of doing that, because you're doing it with people who you don't know. I mean, which can be crazy intimidating. I'm sure somebody's learning about this trip and is like, 0% of me wants to be in a group with people I've never met. A. B, I would 0% go on a trip with people I've never met. How did you overcome that?
Okay.
And then what did you get out of that experience of reading together over time with this group of people?
Yeah. I feel like the best way I could describe the excitement that I felt was like happy clappy. I was like,
yes,
I was so happy clappy to kind of be in an environment where we were reading a book together and we were discussing this. And I love the collaborative feel of that and hearing other people's perspectives and points of view, and the way that where they come from and their lived experience shapes how they see the world.
Yep.
I love that. I think it always leaves us better than it finds us, and is reflective of really the kingdom experience, like the kingdom that God is building. And so to answer your question, I thought that the books and that time together was super helpful, because it kind of allowed us to come to this table as we were, kind of accept and love each other and create that net of safety where we were kind of questioning and learning together and discovering together in a way that felt comfortable. A book, right? Most people have learned from books. The Russ Ramsey book, quite simply, was like revolutionary to me. I feel like I read the first chapter and I was like, it became the gospel. I was like, I have to tell everybody about this book and what we're reading. And it was super exciting to kind of, it's written in such a way where like you're learning, it's written in a kind of like a narrative format where I would consider it historical narrative nonfiction, right? Where he's telling a story, but you're also learning something as well. But it feels like you're reading a book that's like a movie experience. Yeah. And so it did a really great job of like kind of setting the stage and understanding the narrative behind the different artists, that some of which we got to see in Chicago. And so many of them are artists I have never heard of before. And I probably would have missed if I had just arrived at the Art Institute. Hopper is a great example of that. Yep. He has a piece at the Art Institute. I don't think I would have stopped at that painting if I had not read the book and kind of had the dialogue that we were able to have, and the points of conversation surrounding faith and question and struggle that was brought up in his work and his life. And so it was amazing. I felt like it enriched the experience. Another artist that the book highlights is Henry O. Tanner, which was huge. I mean, I had never heard of Henry O. Tanner. I feel like it is part of my life mission to educate the world about Henry O. Tanner.
Yeah, come on.
I own 2 pieces of his work, like copies of them, and one is in my classroom and one is in my library at home. And he is a part of the content that I teach when I cover Reconstruction.
Wow.
I literally bring in a piece from him and I do a whole lesson with students and this piece of art from him. And so it is one of the pieces that I use in class that is one of the first pieces of art where my students kind of get it and the light bulb comes on. And for many of them, it is the first time a teacher has brought a piece of art into a classroom and
Mm,
put it on an easel. And they're already kind of like, what is this? Right? It already
yeah.
sparks curiosity. And
Mm,
it is amazing to be able to see students who many of them have never been in an art museum and now they're engaging with a piece of fine art,
mm,
and they see the themes and they see the themes of history, but they also see the larger themes of
mm,
hope and resilience and the beauty of the African American community,
mm,
and the story of O Tanner. And so none of that would have been made possible for my students, my department, my school, if I had not gone on the
mm,
trip to Chicago
mm,
or read the chapter about O
mm,
Tanner
mm,
or seen the pieces of O Tanner that
mm.
hang at the Art Institute in Chicago. And
Yeah.
so it's no small thing. The book was very impactful on my experience. I loved it.
Hey, V3 friends and family, I want to reach out about our upcoming On Beauty Immersive experience. This is a 6-week curated conversation through Russ Ramsey's book, Rembrandt is in the Wind, followed by a 2-day guided immersive experience at the Art Institute of Chicago. We've done this trip multiple times over the years, and the impact is really transformational to people in their individual lives and their relationship with God and their way of seeing, not just looking at the gospel, but through it. And the impact travels to churches and culture and downstream. It's really a generative, transformational trip. And I would love to personally invite you to join us to come on this trip. If you are curious about beauty as a penultimate thing, or being open and receptive and seeing, again, not just looking at things, but through them, or maybe you just need or want to see the gospel with fresh eyes, this is the trip for you, and you don't want to miss it. Only 12 spots available for this trip, and so I want to extend that invitation because the registration closes November 30th. So follow the links. You can reach out to Ashley at vuvivo.com to get more information. But this is a trip you don't want to miss. And if you know somebody who is curious about the gospel, or maybe looking at it, but needs to maybe explore it with fresh eyes, again, send them this invitation. This is a wonderful trip for you and maybe some of the people that you know to come and just see the gospel with fresh eyes. The second thing I want to do is just challenge us to make this year's trip available to anybody who wants to attend without cost being a barrier. The cost of travel, lodging, all the cost for the entrance to the museum, all of those things is a total of $1,500 per person. And we want to remove the barrier for anybody to come on this trip, particularly young people. There's a lot of people who are in college or just coming out of college who want to go on a trip like this, and it will be a truly life-changing experience that shifts the trajectory of their life and their faith, but they just can't afford it. We would love to be able to scholarship anybody and everybody who wants to go on this trip. And if you want to help us make that possible, the cost of scholarship, again, is $1,500 per person. And you can give to V3 just by going to our website, go to support, and there's a drop down right there to support the On Beauty experience. You can do it that way, or again, you can reach out to Ashley at vuvivo.com. We'll get you connected with how to help. So On Beauty Immersive Experience, this year's trip is going to be absolutely remarkable, and I want to extend a personal invite for you to join us on the trip, ask you to pray for the trip and send it to anybody that you want to extend the invitation to, and then help pray for us to be able to make it possible and bring what you have so that we can scholarship anybody and everybody who wants to be a part of this year's trip. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We hadn't talked about this, so I haven't been able to hear that particular aspect. And I think that's what you hope, right? When you think about leading with beauty and what it is to allow beauty to help us discover what is good so we can know what is true. Beauty's pointing beyond itself. I think when we were all reading these books together, one of the things that stood out to me is you get to know art, right? There's pieces of art that you get to know. There's history, as you described, but you're also having conversations about the artists, and you're getting to intimately know each of these people who we always talk about things being commingled, people being commingled. These are great artists, good people, but deeply broken, struggling in so many ways. And yet God's at work using them to be a part of what he's doing into the future. And just that conversation allowed us to see the gospel with fresh eyes and to
Yep.
experience it. And that's part of the pivot that we're trying to make with this experience is learning to see each other,
Mhm.
to see the gospel,
Yep.
and to recover fresh eyes to look through the lens of the gospel, to see out into the world.
Yeah.
And so part of it is education, but part of it is formation that's taking place
Yeah.
in just learning to look at art again and let it invite you to shift the way that you're looking, not just at something, but through it.
Mhm.
And that takes time. You had to give up a couple days
Mhm.
and set everything else aside. And we really intentionally slow you down during that trip. It's not a jam-packed itinerary. There's a lot of space created for a few different particular curations.
Yeah.
What was it like having that experience of just being able to slow down again with other people and learn in that format as a teacher? Is that like how helpful and important is it for people to get out of a context in order to learn like that?
I think it's so important when we're in a unique time of human existence where everything is rushed and everything is instantaneous and we're bombarded with visuals all the time and on our phones, on TV. And so like humanity by and large has spent a lot of time with art, architecturally speaking, art cathedrals, stained glass, right? So like being in the presence of art was a part of normal healthy rhythms of life. And so we're kind of in a part where when people think of art, they think of like a stuffy museum, right? And so slowing down and allowing yourself to have the mind space and the capacity space to um, look at these pieces of art. But what was unique about ours was that we got to spend multiple days. That I had never done before. I had never spent at least, I had never had back to back visits to an art museum looking at some of these pieces more than once.
Yeah.
That's so unique.
Mm-hmm.
And so it allowed us to have the opportunity, I think, to reflect deeper, to have those moments, those quieter moments where we are uncovering what questions do I have, what words do I have, how am I bringing them to the Lord, what does He have for me?
Mm.
I think the practice of like waiting and receiving and listening to that still quiet voice, we oftentimes don't make time for. And so having this experience allowed for us to have that in a unique way. And it was fairly profound, personally, professionally, and in our church community as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I want to talk about a little bit more about the school and how you were inspired to carry this back to your church, which is amazing for all of us to see. But how did it impact you personally at a faith level? You came into the experience as a Christian, you know the
Yeah.
gospel, you're familiar with the hope that we have in Christ. And our hope was that whether you were brand new and knew nothing about Christianity or you were deeply rooted in your faith, that there would be something from this experience that God would use. How did the experience enrich or deepen your life of faith?
Um, it's a good question. I think um, probably the best way to answer that is one of the first pieces that I came across that was impactful to me was when you go to the Art Institute, there's this beautiful staircase, and kind of positioned to the right of the staircase is this huge piece of stained glass. Um, I can remember as a kid, my dad always loving stained glass. It was probably one of the only pieces of art that like he could ever articulate that he thought was beautiful.
Hmm.
And so whenever I'm in an art museum and I see stained glass, I think of my dad. This particular piece was from the Tiffany studio.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this piece is ginormous. And like the enormity of this piece kind of drew me into the space of the room. And I remember going up to this piece and like spending so much time in front of it, and all of the pieces and components that were brought into the stained glass piece, the layers, the way that it was backlit from the back, it encouraged me to kind of pause and consider my own story of faith and the ways in which like the goodness of the Lord has pieced all of them together, and to sit in the purpose of that and the broken parts and the beautiful parts. Like nothing is to waste, and how all of the colors are coming together. And so it was a really healing experience for me. I think I was in a place of some questions. I was in a place of needing some mending on multiple levels. And this piece allowed me to kind of sit. I'm not always the best at reflecting all the wins, right?
Yeah.
I have a kind of a personality that is constantly wanting to make things better, and make the places and situations and people around me better, and kind of reform. And it allowed me to kind of slow down and reflect, to see all of the good, and the way that God has molded that together, and the parts of my story that that needed healing as well. And so it felt like a gift. It felt like, right, to most people it's just a piece of stained glass, but to me, like, it was more than that. It represented more, and the work of not only me as a teacher, but me as a mom, and me as a mother, and me as a person, a daughter, a wife, a friend, like the facets of who I am and the way in which my faith is a part of all of those pieces and how it's all interwoven together. And the fact that this piece was constructed and designed by a woman in Tiffany's studio felt significant as well. And so I felt like it embodied the way in which I view my faith. It gave me, and so right, we go through seasons, we go through droughts, we go through abundant harvests. And so with that story, or that trip being back 2 years ago now, I still think about, and I have a journal where I write down all the pieces of art that I came across at the Art Institute. And it comes to mind. It's a visual representation in my heart and in my mind on days where it's hard climbing Mount Everest in public education. And so it becomes like an anchor, one of those like Ebenezer stones, right? Those Ebenezer moments where it's like, this is a reminder of the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, and how far God has carried me, and how much he has redeemed, and how much work he still has to do. And it's a reminder that I am enough. And so that's a reminder that I need frequently. And so that is kind of what collided with me, with that piece and the way in which it affected my faith.
It's so beautiful. In prep for the trip, we talk about being open and receptive as just a posture, because we don't know what God will do, like which piece something will come through it that meets something that God's already been doing, right? And is at work at. And I love imagining that staircase. It is beautiful. That piece is enchanting. It's wonderful. And it is, there's something behind it because of the way they light it that draws you to it. But it becomes sticky. A picture's worth 1,000 words. And I like what you're describing, that 2 years later, you can go to your mind and there's things and feelings and truth attached to some of those moments and pieces that's still speaking today. And I think that's the power of art and beauty to do, again, that beauty to good to true. It does stick with you and keep inviting you back. And there's always more there, which is beautiful. And this is kind of, you were inspired not just to be personally refreshed and impacted, and which is all what we hope for, amazing, but the hope is that this will be catalytic. It'll be generative
Yeah.
in whatever space people from the trip. There's pastors who go on the trip, and teachers and business people and parents, and it's students. There's a mix of people, which is part of what makes the trip so fun and just amazing. But the hope is that this will be a seed that goes out and carries something beyond it.
Yeah.
And we never know what that is. That's what's so cool, is it you wait to see what God will do. And in your case, you carried this experience back to your classroom and to the church. And you talked a little bit about your classroom, but just share with people, like, as you traveled back, what did God do with the seed that was planted that you can look at now and go, wow, I watched God give me something that I just stewarded, and it became this impact. Describe a little bit about what happened as you carried it back to the classroom and to your church.
Sure. It's a long story. But I think I could not help but when I was at the Institute and seeing how the experience translated within the group, the way it was received, the way that other people were holding it, and the extraordinary experience it really was, I could not help but think this has to come back to our church community somehow. And also, I need to bring this to my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is accessible for all people. And it's such an empowering experience, not just intellectually, but by and large, and really 100% this is a faith-based experience that is empowering as a person of faith. And so I came back home, right? Everybody knew I was going on this trip because I could not stop talking about this book. I had my husband reading it. I had our friends Charlie and Erica reading it. And so when I came back, I was like, I have to show you these pieces of art. I took all these pictures. I have to share with you my heart. I like bared my soul in my living room with my husband and Charlie and Erica, and like just shared like the encounter that I had with the Lord and the way that he was faithful and good to me, like he always is. And so we started plotting. We have something called house church at Element, and it's like a small group setting. And so I'm a house church leader, and we were meeting as a leadership group to kind of discuss what are we going to do next. And so I basically pitched this idea. Like, what if we do this experience, right? And so I kind of piloted it with Charlie and Erica first. We went down they both read the book. My husband and I we all read, all four of us, my husband, Charlie, Erica, we all go down to the Ringling Museum in Sarasota.
Yep.
And I kind of wanted to kind of recreate it on a little bit of a lighter scale, right? Because we couldn't spend 3 days in the Ringling Museum. And so we had an afternoon. And so I kind of recreated parts of the experience and the dialogue that the four of us had. Like, we have been friends for years, but we had never done something like this before.
Wow.
And so, like, I was crying, Charlie is crying, we're all crying as we're like debriefing and talking and sharing about what we saw of these pieces and how it's resonating with us currently in our walk and season with the Lord. And so we were like, okay, let's work together to build an experience that would work within our church community, right? We have all kinds of ages. It's a multi-generational space. We have elementary, middle, high school, singles, right? Married, no kids, married with kids of all ages. And so the four of us kind of worked together to create questions, and we turned it into the book. We took Russ Ramsey's book, and we turned it into a series over multiple weeks. And one thing that through the conversation with the larger kind of leadership team was we wanted to do a culminating experience at an art museum, okay, which we did end up doing at the Ringling Museum. But one component that was unique and how we adapted it to our community was we brought it to our kids,
Yeah.
which was wild
Yeah.
and so incredible. And so we were able to have these beautiful conversations, multi-generational conversations with kids in middle school and high school about the book. And then also we had pieces of art where I would bring in a piece of art and then we would essentially do a little bit about what he talks about in the book to a piece of art in the room, right? And then being able to kind of empower this multi-generational faith community to interact with these pieces of work through a lens of faith, and then take those tools, those facets that we've done together in a small group setting, and then apply them at the Ringling Museum was amazing. I mean, I'm sure that could seem a little terrifying to have a second grader like in an art museum doing this. It might seem like that's not real. But it is. We were able to quite ask them like, what is the beauty that you see, and to hear their answers and to see how that's reflecting the seed that's growing inside of their heart where Jesus is meeting them was an incredibly beautiful and emotional experience. And it was something that our community of faith still talks about. Our church adopted kind of a practice of purchasing pieces of art and hanging them in the space that we were in, bringing them into our Christmas Eve services and our Easter services. And so it kind of bled out and wide into our faith community and is something that has become a regular routine. And I think that for some of our population in our faith community that maybe not had spent a lot of time with fine art, like they now pause and look at it differently. It is a part of the way in which they see the world and experience Christ through art and beauty. And so that was kind of one way in which we took that. We really took it. We ran with it. I sprinkled it everywhere I could.
It's crazy.
And so it had huge dividends. It was, I mean, when I think about the conversation that we had about the Henry Tanner chapter alone, like that lives rent free in my mind. Yeah. I think about it often. The insight, the perspective of our middle schoolers, high schoolers, the questions, the things that they saw, like we could go on and on. We had to end up cutting, like we had to have our time slot because there was so much to say, so much to uncover, so much to share, so much to reflect. And like, it was wild how beautiful it was.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for just following God's lead and using your gift. I mean, it's a setup like it is for everyone. God's going to take this thing and whatever your gift is, you happen to be a teacher and brilliantly gifted to go curate this type of thing. It'll look different for somebody else, but I think that's the power of an experience like this is it does travel. And for thousands of years, the Christian community around the world was contributing and has contributed some of the world's greatest art.
Yeah.
And over time, we've lost the confidence to lead with beauty. Yeah. And so you coming and participating and gaining those fresh eyes and being refreshed personally and formed and deepened, and then carrying it back to the local church, and then your local church learning and embracing this way of teaching and being a light in the world is inspiring. And I know that I've shared the story with so many other people and leaders. So that's what we hope comes from this. I love hearing about how it changed your classroom and is still seeping into education and formation. And I know I've got to watch your time, but I want to ask you this. Because it's anytime you get an invitation. Right now, we're planning the next trip. So there's another one of these On Beauty trips coming. And so the invitations go out. We see these things on our phone and in our email inbox. And sometimes there's something that does, tug us, or it resonates, or there's something that allures us about an invitation. Yeah. And oftentimes there's a barrier, right? To cost time. I don't have space or margin for this. If you could just speak directly to the person who maybe feels that tug or that push, and they see it and they go, you know what, there's something about this that I should lean into, but I don't know if this is worth it, right? And I'm a little nervous to jump in and participate. What encouragement would you have for that person who just says, I don't know if I have the time? I don't, time and money are kind of the two things that
Sure.
get in the way so many times. If somebody was just like, I want to go, but I'm struggling with just the cost and the time.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person, having been on the trip and seen the impact at your church and in your school?
That's a great question. I think I would say to them, what are I would say to them probably a question, which is probably something a teacher would do. Um, my question would be, what do you want to place value in?
Hmm.
What do you place value in? And what ways can you place that value in your journey through faith? I think maybe underlying some of the hesitancy could be that this is outside of your faith experience. And I know that for me, those whispers, those tugs, those pulls, those quiet moments, placing value on listening, growing quiet, remaining curious, and listening to that steady knock has always paid off. There's always something that Jesus has for you in that. There's always something for you to learn. And so prioritizing and placing a value on that, I would say, is where the growth happens.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people want like a big, they want it written in the sky. They want a big banner. And really it's the quiet voice, the quiet knock, those small yearnings that you have, maybe that you've not told anyone. Place value on that. It's time for that to hold space for you, for the opportunity of what you can get away and do with the Lord. That's never time wasted. That's always money well spent. And you have value. And so meet that value with your time, with the value of your time and your money.
Yeah.
You're worthy of that. And so is your walk with the Lord and your faith journey.
Yeah. That's awesome. You're a great teacher. That was a fantastic question. Yeah, Riley's like, try that sometime. No, it's a fantastic question. And I love just that you are enough, right? You don't need us to tell you that, but I'm so glad that you got that answer and that reassurance and that you came back to the classroom. You're exactly the type of teacher that we pray fills every classroom. And so just know that we see that life and beauty of the gospel in you, and we see it at work in the classroom. 7th largest school district in the country, I believe. And so what gives me hope is to know that there's a teacher like you every day climbing Everest in a classroom, thinking about how to set up an easel and bring a painting and maybe open a window of faith and a door of hope in a place that people may not be expecting it. So if you are watching this episode, join me and just say a prayer for Liza, for her classroom. Thank God for great teachers and for the work that you do every day. It's super, super sacred. And we don't get to say it enough to teachers, but we're honored to get a little bit of your time. And thank you for reflecting back on the trip. And I always say this, but here's to what we can't yet see. Go back out and keep leading with beauty. We appreciate it.